Hello everyone. Welcome to Anthropology Analytica. I'm Dr. Arjun Bopanna, Anthropology faculty at InsightsIAS. In today's video, let us discuss the scheme of evolution of marriage that was given by Morgan. So as you all know, Morgan is a classical evolutionist and he tries to explain the evolution of society in giving example of marriage, kinship, family, etc. So in context of marriage, let's see how he tries to explain that how society has evolved according to the various stages of marriage, or rather he uses marriage to explain the evolution of society. So how society had simple marriage practices, and as society evolved it became much more complex. So in the context you need to explain about a little bit about Morgan and his concept of classical evolutionist and how he tries to explain the evolution, the origin and evolution of society by giving the example of marriage, kinship, family, political organization, etc. So in this particular topic, which question, which is a 15 marker, you need to write an introduction, a little bit about Morgan and Morgan's view of marriage and the definition of marriage or the context of classical evolution. And in the body, since it's a discuss question, there has to be two parts. One, evolutionary scheme that was given by Morgan with respect to the different stages of marriage as seen from the evolutionary point of view. And then the criticism of this scheme. As you all know, classical evolutionists in general have been criticized. Specific to marriage evolution, how different anthropologists have criticized Morgan. You need to bring that out in criticism. And lastly, the conclusion. You need to provide just one or two lines about the present view of anthropologists. Okay, so the classical evolutionist tries to attempt to study the origin and evolution of social institutions in order to explain the evolution of society. So Morgan, he took marriage as an example to explain how society evolved. So he says, or rather, he gives the following stages. So he says that the marriage as an institution actually began with a stage which he called it as promiscuity. So here in promiscuity, the relationship between male and female relationship was unrestrained, meaning there was no specific rule with respect to whom one should have sexual relationship with. So just like animal, men and women could have sexual relationship with anybody. So there were no specific rules. So that stage of human that stage of human where they were similar, there were no moral principles or moral codes, and they were able to have sexual relationship with anybody. That stage he called it as promiscuity. And in this stage, Morgan says that one finds exchange of wives, giving wives on loan, or other such customs in the primitive tribes. And basically he says that this is not marriage. So there was no institution of marriage during this phase. Okay, so there was no institution of marriage. Then the beginning of marriage starts with the stage which he calls it as consanguineous marriage. In this stage, there was prevalence of endogamy among blood relatives. Okay, so in this consanguineous stage, there is endogamous practice among the blood relatives. Okay, probably then they realize the harmful effect of endogamy or whatever. So then he says the consanguineous marriage gives rise to group marriage. So in group marriage, as the name itself suggests, several brothers or several male members of a group married several women of another group with whom they had sexual relationship, but it was not defined within the group. So it was not defined within the group. I'll repeat again. So several brothers or several male members of a group married several women of another group with whom they had sexual relationship, but the relationship within the group was not defined. However, there was restriction on sexual relationship with persons of the other group. So this stage, he called it as group marriage. The next stage of marriage is Syndyasmian marriage. In Syndyasmian marriage, there were temporary pairing between male and female. So then there were no restricted or rigid rules and regulation with respect to the permanence of this relationship. That means the pair could be broken anytime by anybody. So that stage of temporary pairing is called as Syndyasmian. In the next stage, we see patriarchal marriage. So in this patriarchal marriage, men could marry several female. That is polygyny marriage, or this stage is about polygamous. So male could marry several female and they lived separately from each other. If the society was matrilineal, then Morgan says that we also see polyandry. So this is the stage of polygamy, either polygyny or polyandry. So if the society was patrilineal, we see polygyny, and if the society was polyandry, if it was matrilineal, we see polyandry. And the last stage, according to Morgan, was monogamy. So obviously monogamy, it was one male marrying another female, and it had rules and regulations, and they lived with each other until legal separation or religious separation. So because Morgan comes from the Victorian era, and the monogamous was the provision or marriage rules in that stage or in that society. So therefore Morgan says this is the highest level of development of marriage. So these are the stages of evolution of marriage. So promiscuity, consanguineous marriage, group marriage, Syndyasmian marriage, patriarchal marriage, and monogamy. All right. So this has been criticized. So it has been criticized by Westermarck, Majumdar, and Louis. Bring that out. So Westermarck says that monogamy is actually not the most evolved form of marriage. Actually, he says that this has been borrowed from animal. Among animal, also we see that there is pairing between one male and one female. So he says the present form is not about evolution of marriage, but it is the change in the moral principles. Further, Majumdar says that the practice of promiscuity and premarital and extramarital relationship cannot lead us to believe that promiscuity was the rule in primitive society, because he says among the most primitive tribes in India, right, we see monogamy. In spite of we seeing monogamy, there is also prevalence of premarital sex, etc., which is okay and common in those tribes. So among the Indian tribes, the most primitive ones, monogamy is the rule. So you cannot conclude saying that monogamy is the advanced or the highest stage of marital evolution. Okay, so then we also see Louis criticizing Morgan's classification, who he says that promiscuity cannot be found among the contemporary primitive society. So if promiscuity was the most ancient form of marriage, but that should have been seen in primitive tribes, which we do not see. So therefore we can conclude saying that the evolutionary scheme of Morgan with respect to marriage is not correct. Further, in the conclusion, you can always say that an attempt at tracing evolution is worthless, and we need to see marriage institution specific to a particular society, because there are socio-economic and moral and psychological factors that play an important role in with respect to what kind of marriage we see in the society. So therefore this scheme of marriage evolution is not correct. All right, so this is how your answer should be. You give an introduction about evolution and Morgan's classification, and then you explain the Morgan's classification, criticize it, and finally conclude the answer. All right, I hope this was useful. In our next video, let us try to answer this question. Bring out the difference between lineage and clan. Give examples. I hope it was useful. Thank you for watching.